Hey, welcome back for another video. As many of you have been following kind of what I've been doing, I had shoulder surgery a couple months ago and working on sort of rehabbing that shoulder. So I'm going to run through the exercises that I've been doing to try to get my shoulder back. And quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, nor am I a physical therapist. However, my lovely sister here is a licensed physical therapist. And so she's going to coach me up today, and these are going to be the top 10 exercises that you can use in order to strengthen your shoulders if you're a kayaker or a paddler and you're having some shoulder pain. So Marcy, and again, I'll put down, she's got her own Facebook group and her website at Fitness Baker, so you can check out her three-pillared approach to health, which is just awesome and very enthusiastic, and so great to have her here today. So why, like, even if I hadn't had surgery, how are these exercises going to help people prevent further injuries or help them with their shoulder strength?
Yes. Well, in general, I would say as we get older, gravity, activity is going to definitely put your body or compromise your shoulder mechanics over the course of time.
Well, that's depressing.
So, so it's important for anybody, especially if you want to be active over the course of time, you want to have a balanced program. So your rotator cuff or rotor cuff or rotator cuff or whatever people tend to call it, it's your rotator cuff, is actually 4 muscles that hold the head of this long bone, your humerus, in the socket, which is your glenoid fossa, in case any Jeopardy people out there want the $1,000 column.
I didn't know I had one of those.
So it's going to hold your joints together, so if you lose strength over time, you're going to get all this accessory motion in here, so this can actually accelerate any wear and tear in your shoulders. So the more active you are and the mechanics start to change, you get all that accessory motion. You're going to have arthritis anyway, sorry to tell you, but we all are, and so it just depends on what level, the extent. And so the rotator cuff, if you have that, even if you don't have a shoulder problem, you're doing a lot of preventative you're taking a lot of preventative measures, so you won't have to deal with pain because no one wants pain. So a lot of programs don't really isolate the rotator cuff, so that's one thing that you'll get out of this. And in addition, a lot of people do too much work to, get big pecs and, just really focus on doing everything through the chest. You really need to balance your program to posturally, exactly. We don't want to have you look like an old man.
Yeah.
So if you do too much work here and you don't do any work in your back, you're going to have that imbalance, which is going to potentially give you impingement, tendonitis, bursitis, any of those things. So having that additional balance of really doing a lot of even stretching through your chest, which we can talk about another time because this is 10 exercises for strengthening, but always being aware of your posture when you do any shoulder exercises is really important. If you do a bunch of work and you're doing all this and then you're doing this, it's not really going to give you the benefit. So if you're going to put the time into your exercises, you want to do them as correctly as you can, because then you're going to get the most benefit from the time you're putting in. So that's what we're going to run through now, is the top 10.
The top 10.
The top 10.
So the first one, and again, when I was at physical therapy the last time, I was cleared to start using weights, but they were very clear about limit your range of motion and limit the weights to a point where you don't feel pain. If you start feeling pain, then stop and do something different. So I'm feeling pretty good, and it took me a couple weeks to figure out what that right spot was, because I'd do 2 exercises, like 2 reps, and it would all of a sudden feel great, and and then I'd be sore for 3 days afterwards because I was probably doing too much. So.
Yes.
So the first exercise, and again, I forget what this is called, but so make sure my posture's good.
Exactly.
So I'm holding these weights out, 45-degree angle, and I'm just sort of lifting, and they said keep below my eyes.
Yes.
And sets of sit anywhere from 12 to 20, really.
Yep. And you do want to do higher reps of a lower weight, because that's what's actually going to help build the muscle too. And now that your shoulders are relaxed too, so a lot of common, if you're using a weight that's too heavy, like Ted was just talking about, if you're doing a weight that's too heavy, your form is probably going to be compromised. So for the cues that he would be giving here, and he's looking directly into the camera, his shoulders are not coming up and down. He's keeping these relaxed, so he's focusing on doing a slight angle, is actually working on one of the rotator cuff muscles called your supraspinatus. And this is one, again, where that you have that slight 45-degree angle. That's what would be more beneficial for your rotator cuff versus just a shoulder flexion or front raise, which people can do. And having the thumbs up is very important. Okay, cool. So that's, thumbs up. So sometimes people do a front raise and their arm and their hand is actually parallel to the ground. In this exercise, you want to have the thumbs up. So his cueing is very good. Neck is in midline, so you're looking also in this plane, not just this plane, but that the ear, shoulder, hip, and ankle are all in one line. So good job.
Cool.
And again, this weight for 5s is actually a little heavier than what I would recommend for somebody just starting out. Like
Okay.
really you're thinking like, 2 or 3 pounds, like gotta hide in a corner closet because you're too embarrassed. It's not big manly weights, but it's better to not hurt yourself, and you're going to just benefit that small rotator cuff muscle.
The first couple weeks I wasn't using any weight at all.
Yes, perfect.
All right, so the next one, good old-fashioned curls, and I can step it up with these ones. When my elbows are down, I feel pretty good. So same thing with posture.
Yes, and again, these are 20s, so Ted is, demonstrating good form, and there's multiple ways and positions that you can work your bicep. So your bicep does flex your elbow or bend your elbow, but it also works we call supinate. So for him, he's actually doing a little bit of supination. So he's starting with the weights parallel to his body and then rotating it so his palms come into his chest. So again, if you're doing this, I'm sorry, you need to cut back on the weight, but he is not using any momentum, and he is controlling the weights as they're descending as well. So you're going to, again, you're getting all kinds of fancy education here, but this is concentric, which people that do weights for a long period of time, when you're shortening the muscle, it's concentric, but when you're actually working the muscle with control as it lengthens, it's called eccentric, and that's actually going to be, again, giving your muscles that control where functionally you're not planning movements when you're rafting and rowing. It's just you're responding to the current, you're doing all those things. So like changing the speed or controlling it as it's lengthening, that's a functional way that the muscle still works. So that looks good. So you can go heavier on these. You're still thinking 12 to 20. So if you can't get through at least 12, you need to go down in your weight.
Okay. Third one.
Yeah, now this would be, again, really critical for anybody doing any exercise program. And his shoulders are really in good position posturally. He's in a nice squat, so you're actually doing upper and lower body. And he's bringing his elbows. You want to keep them, again, almost like coming right along the rib cage, not shrugging the shoulders here, and just bringing the weights back. So you want to feel it right here in these muscles that bring the scapula or the shoulder blade closer to the spine. So you almost want to picture if there was a pencil right along between your shoulder blades, you're trying to squeeze that pencil together. So again, looking really good here. This is a large muscle group. Most people don't work this heavy enough. So you could go definitely with a heavier weight for this type of exercise. And really, everybody needs to be doing things like this.
I do these a lot.
And not many people do, because you're actually working here and you're doing also a nice stretch to the chest too. So you'd want to do like pectoral stretching and upper back strengthening, because if your pecs are too tight, you're going to lose range into those extension positions, which makes sense, right?
Cool.
So that's good. And then you also have the ones coming back. You do those on the ball, right?
We'll do those on the ball, yeah.
Perfect. So that's 1, 2, 3.
So let's move on to the bands.
And these are not girly either, so if you need to get green or whatever, this is a really good way. So like free weights, gravity is always going to be pulling you down. This gives you resistance through the range in a different way. So it's good to use a balance of free weights and TheraBand.
Cool. This is Archer. And my posture's good.
Very good. Yep. And again, his foot position is also allowing for that rotation on that diagonal. Because again, this is a functional thing. We do not plan our movements in this planar way. So especially with rafting and kayaking and all kinds of things, it's good to add different planes. So a diagonal is a little more advanced, but very good for where he is at this stage of his recovery.
And then say, even though my work on my injured shoulder, it says keep that balance and do everything on both sides.
Exactly. And it allows for you guys to see it better too, where his elbow's just continuing to go in that same diagonal. And different colors represent different thicknesses of the band. So again, it's not, something that you just want to think about like, oh, I'll just get this color because I like it. There's a purpose for each color because they're different densities. And this is a band, there are TheraTubes, so if you're in Walmart or you're looking for places like that, the TheraTube, again, it's a slightly different density. But they do have handles. His grip, it's not like he's slipping all over the place. So the length of the band and how taut it is, if he were to hold more at the end, there's less resistance. So you could have a thicker band, but then just create more length. So it still gives you where your form is still critical. The form is far above everything than trying to go heavier weight when you're not ready. But this is perfect for him.
I can put a link to some of the TheraBands in the section below. So this next one, internal, external rotation, you call it?
Yep.
And then I was asking Marcy this morning, they gave me this styrofoam block put under my shoulder, But I don't have a styrofoam block. It said use a towel. I've just been using my fist, but I didn't really know why I was supposed to do that.
Yeah. And so for this, again, the tendency, if you were going to be pulling across his belly, so here, his elbow is at 90 degrees, which is another key. This is doing internal and external rotation, this is a rotator cuff exercise. So his elbow is bent, he's pulling across his belly, right across his belly button. So for this one, again, the paper probably wouldn't go anywhere, or the styrofoam. When I've worked with patients and outpatient, I kept the paper there because it's the cue to keep your hand or your elbow together. So for him, he's pulling across his belly,
right.
Yes, you're isolating, because again, if you're pulling across, this would be working his pec. So if anybody who does like, a pec fly and you're on the incline or you're on a bench, you're not going to be, the idea of this is to isolate it to the internal rotator, your subscapularis actually. So you are still getting some pecs, but that's the purpose of it, is that you really want to isolate that small muscle group that has that function that I told you earlier about keeping the head of the humerus in that socket.
So then this one I'll flip around, so the same thing, but just going the other way.
So again, and the styrofoam, I wanted to come up with something fancy and tell me, styrofoam has healing properties, and that's why. But you can also, so for him, another reason, it's almost like you two want to picture that your forearm is almost coming across the table. So this you may substitute more with, where, if your elbow extends and your palm comes closer to the ground, that's one thing. Or if you start to rotate your body, that's another common substitution. Or again, his hand is giving him the cue to keep his elbow here, because if you don't have something like this and you come out, you can see if the paper falls, you're getting a cue right there that, a therapist can't be with you all the time. So this is such a good exercise to do. You want to get the most benefit from it. So again, for Ted, I would say he's having more of an, even you want to keep your elbow neutral or your wrist neutral. Here I am giving you cues. This is your foot. No. But you want to kind of make it so if you start to feel like you're extending the wrist, you're extending the elbow, you're trying to recruit muscles or wrist extensors or triceps. And you're just, again, either stand a little bit closer, so instead of having to change the length of the band, the color, he could potentially make it easier by taking a step closer to the table to finish out the reps, or come farther away and it takes more resistance to do it. So again, just be careful. And it's not really that big of a deal to keep his wrist neutral, but you would just stop when the potential strength of the muscle has gone through that full range.
This one's harder than
Yes. So, and this is one where, again, none of us, if you didn't have a shoulder injury, most likely you wouldn't do it. But if you do it before you have inflammatory onset, it's even better. So again, you're not going to go to the gym, and again, who cares what other people think, first of all. But if you need to do them at home, it is really good for somebody to do this, even if it was just twice a week. It's not like you have to do it every day if you don't have symptoms, you're not recovering from a procedure like you are.
Right.
As a PT, again, you're never going to get results if we teach it to you and you never do it again until you go back to your session. Doing it every day, multiple times a day, that's the other thing.
Even every day, or like 3 days a week? Or?
So at this point in time, for you, recovering from a rotator cuff repair, you would want to do them every day. If you're just doing this as a maintenance thing, you could really you'd still benefit 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
And that's probably excessive, but it depends on if you're just a person now, we're getting to be springtime, you're going to do like yard work, you're doing repetitive braking, again, you're going to be doing those things that you haven't done for a very long period of time.
Right.
It's better to start doing it now to condition the tissue so it's not going to get overstrained and then you're in pain.
Okay. And then our last band exercise that I've been doing, I'm going to move this up a little bit closer, I think. This one's hard.
Yes. And this is a good one, too.
So we're up against the wall, this one a little bit, and I'm supposed to keep my elbows and the wrists in line, and then keep it perpendicular going. That's hard.
Just gonna back it up. So for him, you can see he can go all the way up the wall, but it's very hard to hold his elbows at that position, and plus some of his body weight is going into the wall, so there is a lot of control that he has to have with this too. So with this rotator cuff, or when you're recovering from a repair, there's a period of time that you have to keep the elbow immobilized, and you wouldn't be doing this, so the shoulder's going to be a little bit tight for him, but he's worked through that range. So this you're getting strength and range, so it's a little definitely harder when you're doing movements over your head. And again, what he said in the beginning is if he started to feel pain, would you say that there's effort and strain and maybe some discomfort but not pain?
Right, yeah.
So that's perfect.
Make the shoulder burn on both sides.
Yeah, So if you, in this
They can't see you.
situation, if you're doing it, and that's the thing, sometimes people ask me, well, what's the difference between like, oh, I'm tired, I really want to stop, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm feeling pain, but is pain, like, yes, if he was doing this and he started going up, you're like, and you fight through it because, again, you're doing good. They're in this situation, like you said, if it hurts, just like the orthopedic told you, don't do it. So if you're feeling like, that's why I distinguish for you, is it discomfort, strain, uncomfortable, or is it something that's really painful? So knowing the difference there, recovering from a procedure is super important. If you're just like, oh, I just don't feel like doing this anymore, you need to push through it. Like this would be one you'd take out because it's hard.
It's hard.
But sometimes the hardest ones give you the best benefit as long as it's timed appropriately in the protocol, which he's gone through the steps.
Definitely get the fatigue burn on that one.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, so going to the physio ball.
All right, and these obviously you can get anywhere. You want to inflate them.
Tip that down a little bit.
And this gives you a little bit of instability too, because the ball rolls all over the place, so it is a little bit of core too. He could stay up and he has good control, but if you can't do the good shoulder positions with these, he could always put his knees down too, so that gives him, he doesn't work as hard with balance, so he can focus on the upper body exercise. So you definitely wouldn't be doing 20s for these types of exercises.
I just have like this hassock at home that I use because I can't find a physio ball.
Yep. So anything, and that's the thing, if you were starting out and you weren't athletic like what Ted is, most of the people that are watching this probably do have some outdoor activity. So if you don't have to, if you're falling off the ball and you can't do the exercise correctly for the shoulder, that's all I'm saying. Using a hassock, using something more stable is a good way to go. But if you are, a higher level, this can actually be beneficial. Because for you, you've recovered fully, or getting there. The ball adds instability where if you couldn't keep your balance, you clearly don't want to fall on your affected shoulder, your surgical shoulder, because you don't want to have any trauma disrupt anything because you've come so far. So Ted is not in that situation, but keep that in mind.
Good core workout too.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so the first one, actually, seems like I go a lot heavier. This one seems to be easy for me, but I'm just, what are these guys? I don't even know what these are called.
So these are you're going into shoulder extension. So this would be working, he's still squeezing his shoulder blades together. So he's getting these set of muscle groups here, like those scapular muscles, but he's getting the posterior delt, which again, kind of is like the big all-encompassing, people that have good shoulder definition. And there's actually 3 heads of the deltoid. So you got, the posterior, you got your middle and your anterior. And just like I was saying before, we're really focused in these flexion patterns. Everything we do during the day is in front of us. So it's really good to spend time doing things in this position. So his arms are straight. He's getting a little bit of tricep because it's still stabilizing for him to lift the weights back. Again, he's not shrugging through his shoulders. That's another big common substitution. So this looks really good. I mean, the ball's a little wider than his frame, so for him to be out to the side a little bit is okay, but you're really just trying to almost scrape your rib cage as you extend up. But that looks good. So you are going to go, he might be able to do 10s here, but again, you're thinking higher reps of lower weight. So if you can't get to 12 with good form, and again, if he starts to go back, but he shrugged his shoulder up, he would go lower in the weight and then just keep the lighter weight, but do more like 20 reps instead of the 12.
Yeah, that was 20 there.
Yeah, so that looks good. So he probably could have done 10s max, but at this point in time, you're almost better to go lighter in this situation than heavier.
Right, I found that too. If I go heavier, I'm sore for 3 days afterwards. All right, so the next one, this one, so these aren't even too heavy for this one. See how it feels. Not terrible.
Yes. So again, there's multiple things happening here. So again, he's keeping the shoulders away from the ears. And then he's coming into a standing external rotation, or when we did the standing band, that's when we used the styrofoam or the paper or whatever. But he's having to hold himself in extension and then bring the palms up towards the ceiling. So really in this position going back, if you're lying on your back, you should be able to keep the elbows bent, almost feel the palms on the back of it to the floor. So to try to do that in a gravity dependent situation, that's what's making it very difficult. So this, most of the people I worked with would actually do 2s or 3s and not 5s, but Ted is, so you can see that he's starting to use a lot of effort here.
Yeah.
His form is still good, but you can see when he's starting to burn out that this would be an appropriate weight for that type of exercise.
What was that one called?
I would call it, being on your belly is called prone external rotation.
Okay.
With extensions, because there's multiple things going on, so there's a lot of burn, because again, and you're on the ball, So you're still doing core
Right, the
with
core
that as
stuff.
well.
All right, and the last one we've been doing on the ball, and oh, actually that feels better than it did
Yes.
last week.
Okay, good.
That's
Well,
good.
and again, so this one again is working more of the posterior delt. And you know, people sometimes do these standing, but lying in this position, he gets the added, I would say, challenge of gravity. So again, for him, he's not doing any of the substitute. I tend to do that where my shoulders come up towards my ears. So if you were to be done with this sequence of exercise and you're like, oh, my neck's so tight, you either went too heavy on the weights or yeah, you were shrugging the whole time and doing that common substitution.
Yeah, I've had that happen. I think
Yeah.
it was going too heavy.
So this right here is perfect. He should be able to get to about the height of his shoulders. It would be unusual, but he said people have more flexibility through their pecs, but I would say typically males more than females to some extent. You're not necessarily going to be able to get to midline completely in this position without feeling a pull through the front of the chest. But he looks good. You want to try to keep the arm straight. If you have a slight bend in the elbow, that's okay too. You know, if you just don't want to go into a row, which when you finish that last set, I will just have you demonstrate the difference there. So again, this would be, we call this horizontal abduction. So abduction is when your arm is coming away from your body, so it's just in a different plane. You're in this transverse plane going this way versus coming up going to the side of the body this way. So that's why when you're lying on your belly. So if he were to come up and you start to feel like your elbows bend, like if I had him puppets on a string, this is a separate exercise, but say if you go to lift your arms to the side and that was too difficult, it's almost like your physics, you're just changing the lever arm, so you're still working the muscle groups, but instead of having to lift the whole arm to the side, you're coming back. So it's going to be focused a little bit more on like what he did for the rowing already, but this could be, it's still slightly harder because he's on his belly versus, you know, standing in that squat position doing it this way. You know, so it is, what he did is ideal, but, and if you start to bend the elbows, you're already doing the rows and standing anyway,
Right.
but you're still getting benefit from that. But ideally with that one, the focus would be arm strength.
Cool.
Yay! Very good job, Ted. Thumbs up.
All right, so probably if I had started doing these 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have required shoulder surgery. Maybe one of those things. So
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, you
Yeah.
always want to put the odds in your favor, and what I work with people on certainly is that you are not fortune tellers. We don't know what the future holds in store, but if you live a lifestyle and you try to do things in a preventative way, in a balanced way, then your chance of having that happen is less. But even traumas that people have had years and years before, just that change in mechanics can sometimes still predispose you to having this happen no matter what.
Right.
So let's hope we're not going to. We're not going to whip yourself with a wet noodle thing you could have, but it definitely is what you're doing now, is educating people that yes, if you do it, it's more likely that you'll have to dedicate yourself with exercise rather than having to go under the knife.
And I think for me, I'm such a routine habit guy too, so trying to redefine this as part of my daily routine is going to be important to me so that I can get out there and be paddling Gorge Creek with you guys in a couple months and not be sitting on the sidelines watching or changing things up. So those are the exercises. I encourage you to give them a shout or give them a try, and then again, post us any questions you have in the comments, and again, check out our Marcy's website and enjoy. And thanks a lot for coming along with my sister. Awesome.
Oh, I'm so proud.
Good.
He looks good.
Good.
Very good.
Awesome, guys. Thanks a lot for joining here. Hit that subscribe button, like, do all the things you do. I appreciate you joining in, and we'll see you on the river.